So if you guys remember when we scouted this house, I thought there would be a really cool opportunity when the sun came around and started to set in the west. So we've got these west-facing windows and this really cool stair set with these laser-cut perforated railings. And as you can see over here, the sun is beginning to sort of filter through there and create this really cool texture. My idea, as I see this develop, is to have my assistant pose on the stair set opposite us and get her shadow as she walks down the stairs. It's kind of like adding a model to an image without adding a model at all. And it's trying to pull something a little bit more artistic and interesting out of this house, which is not the most colorful thing in history, but I think there's a better way to show these stairs than by just taking a literal Xerox of what's in front of us. So it's a little bit of abstraction, a little bit of art, and a little bit of cleverness to get a model into this shot. Another cool thing about this is that I'm gonna be shooting pretty wide. I'm gonna be using a 17mm lens. If I had the model coming up these stairs, she would be distorted and look way bigger than she really is. So I'm gonna get my composition set up, and it still looks like there's maybe a half an hour until this is perfect, but I imagine it will take me a few minutes to get the camera dialed in exactly as I want it, and then we'll wait for that light to hopefully get even better than it is right now. So here's what it looks like now. Like I said, I don't think the light is in the perfect spot, and I'm not gonna dial in my composition until the light is the way I want it. So what I want is this patch of light to move up the stairs, and as the sun gets lower, it's going to come and bring that a little bit higher right in the middle of this composition. I'm gonna keep an eye on it over the next 20 or so minutes, and I'm gonna wait until the light is about where I want it to get the composition dialed in. We're just getting ready now because I know this is going to happen quickly, so I want to make sure all the equipment and everything is ready to go when the light is perfect. Okay, so here we are about 25 minutes later, and the light has developed beautifully. It's a little bit more golden in color, and it has moved up the stairs substantially. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get the shot composed again around the things I cannot move, and because I'm in such a tight space, in order to remove as much distortion as possible, I'm going to back this camera up as far as I can. That means getting down, getting a little intimate with the corner here. And I'm going to put that tripod leg straight down. And I'm going to back this guy up right there, straight against the wall. And I'm going to compose using live view. Thank you. So I've got live view on my iPad. And I'm going to level the camera with the built-in levels. And then I can find my shot. I'm going to raise the camera just a little bit. You can see David up there filming me to separate the light from that railing. I like that composition. Let's rotate the camera a little bit to get some more of the downstairs. See that stair at the bottom, how that's beginning to distort? What I'm going to do is shift up with my lens a little bit to remove some of that distortion and get some more height to this photo. Okay, so the composition is locked in. I'm going to focus the camera and we're going to start taking some shots. I've composed and focused, and I've taken a test shot, and what you can see down in the bottom of the living room, on the bottom right corner here, it's a little bit of a mess. So Colleen, I'm going to have you pull that big fake plant out again, and I'm going to have you remove. There's a blanket on the stool, and I want you to organize those pillows a little bit better. All right, last thing I'm going to have you do is this chair right here. Push that maybe a foot towards the couch. So now I'm going to have you come up, and you're going to be our model. So rather than have you actually be in the photo, what I'm going to do is just have your shadow show up on that wall. So I'm going to have you walk up this flight and up the next flight, and hopefully you should get up there and we should see you. I'm going to turn on live view. We should see your shadow showing up right in this spot of sunlight. So why don't you go ahead and walk up there, and we'll see how that looks. I love that, but it's driving me crazy that your head is in. What happens if you take a step left or right? Yeah, there we go. Now your head's off of the top. So put is it your right arm on the railing, and your left arm, can you hide it behind your body so you look as, there we go. That's pretty cool. Look forward for me, and look to the left. Look to the right. Step a little bit. Ooh, I like that right there. See if you can get your hair to separate from the shadow. And just start and walk up like as you normally would. That might be it. Tilt your head again so your hair kind of has light passing through it. Yeah, do it the other way, right there, yeah. Okay, I think that's gonna be it. Okay, so we've got our shots of the model and her shadow against the wall. I'm gonna go ahead and bracket 5 exposures. Right now, I'm at 1/50th f11 ISO 200 because there's so much light in here. And I'm gonna go 2 stops in either direction and wrap this guy up. Let's jump into post-production and put this together. Okay, so here we are back in post-production for our shadowy stare, mysterious figure image. I like this picture a lot. I like the sort of different direction that we headed with it. In front of me, I probably have, it looks like I've got 35 or so options of Colleen posing on that stairway. And I've gone through and I've found what I think is the best one. We got a little goofy here at the end. Crazily enough, I think the first shot of her that I took is the best one. I also kind of like this. Maybe I'm crazy. I think it's just a little bit different, but I'm gonna run with the first one, and it's kind of got this like pensive, quiet look to it. So I've gone ahead and rated that 1 star just so I can mark it in my mind. And I'm gonna jump over to our bracketed exposures. And once again, I have shot 5 bracketed exposures, giving myself plenty of options for post-production. I do think that this is a little darker than the last few images that we've made. Remember where we were on that histogram. So it's gonna be right about in there. Maybe I can use this image and pull the exposure down. That's what I'll do. I'm going to use the 1 bracket brighter. I'm going to pull the exposure down a little bit. And I should still get, yep, I've still got enough detail on that highlight. And the reason I'm doing this is because there's going to be more in the shadows for me to pull from. I'd rather sort of use a brighter exposure to give myself more shadow detail. Especially I'm going to be pulling pretty heavily, which I am here. So that looks pretty good. That's a relatively heavy edit. And just like I did in the last lesson, I'm going to match these 2 exposures between my chosen frame of my assistant in the shadows and my base ambient exposure here. So I'm going to go to settings, match total exposures. And once that's done, my 2 exposures should be more or less exactly the same. There's a slight white balance difference, 4750 and 28. So I'll just match those up, 4750 and 28. So now I have my 2 images and they are equal in exposure and color balance. I'm going to go ahead and right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Lightroom is brilliant because it will actually open these 2 images stacked perfectly together in Photoshop as they were shot on a tripod and they're perfectly aligned. I'll be able to immediately jump in and start editing them together without any blur between frames. Here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to use a very similar technique. Just like in the last shot where I used a layer mask to adjust the curves or exposure, brighten, darken, add a little color, I'm going to add a layer mask to these layers. And since they are perfectly stacked thanks to the tripod, you can see even at the pixel level, there is no movement between frames. So when I add a mask to this top frame, which has our shadow in it, and the bottom frame, which is our base, I can select my mask, grab my brush, and I can paint out anything I don't need, such as my iPad creeping into the frame. And there is my model, my lovely figure, laid perfectly on top of the base exposure. You can see that the shadows moved a little bit, but because we're using a, again, big soft brush, we get a seamless transition. And if I go too far, you can see I'll start to paint over her. But we get a seamless transition between overlaid photos. So there is our edit. Now this image does feel slightly darker than the previous 2, and I'm okay with that. It has to be a little darker to show sort of that contrast between the sunlight and the interior. It would look a little weird if we had this bright sunlight in focus and the interior was basically the same luminosity, so it's okay to have the rest of the image in a bit darker shadow, but I do think it's just a touch dark in the foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a curves layer, and rather than use this to add contrast or anything, I'm going to drag that curve up, and what I'm going to do is leave this area brighter than the rest. So I'm going to, on my curves mask, hit Command I. That will invert the mask, fill it with black. And then I'm not going to take a brush. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the lasso. And this area down here, I think should match exposure value wise. Should be somewhat closer to our last few frames. And we'll see how it looks with this handrail, sort of this perforated metal. Hopefully we can get away with it. And I'm just going to hit the delete key, and you can see that immediately added it to the mask there. All right, it's looking pretty good. It doesn't look bad down here because it is that darker wood, but we very slightly missed the edge. So I'm going to grab my brush, get it the right size here with the foreground color set to, how do I want to do this? Yeah, foreground color set to white to bring a little bit more. There we go. So the foreground color is set to black, and I'm going to paint out that mask where it went a little bit too far over the edge of the stairs. Okay, so there you can see we've sort of brightened up the downstairs, again, to match the previous exposures and sort of lend credence to the fact that it is sunlit down there, just like this area in the stairs up here. And I'm okay with these shadows sort of being the same darkness as these shadows, but I want where it's bright and lit by the sun to be a bit brighter. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. There is a couple spots of color weirdness in here. This has like a blue-green thing going on. I'm going to neutralize that a little bit. So just real quickly, I'm going to bring in a solid color layer. I'm going to make it nice and warm. Set the layer mode to color, 10%. You know what? It's a bit much on the whole image, but I like it. I like the effect it gives to sort of everything. It is warmer than the rest, but I'm going to grab this again. I'm going to chill out the warmth downstairs a little bit. We'll go to 50% here. That's looking really nice. I'm going to invert that, Command-Shift-I. And now my painting will be constrained by that mask to here. And again, I'm just sort of selectively warming up this image. Let's see what those two layers did there. We can turn them on and off. And yeah, it goes from like a weird blue-green to a much more warmer, believable afternoon sunlight type of thing. So that's looking really nice. It really worked on this edge of the staircase. I like that a lot. On the whole, I think this is looking very good. What else could I do here? I think that's going to be about it. I'm going to go ahead and Command-Alt-Shift-E and clone out some of this stuff that's bugging me. That's kind of like a little mosquito right there, that bright light in the background. That's better. And then there's this guy. Let's see if content aware can take care of that without me getting down and dirty with it. Yes, it can. It's kind of goofy looking, isn't it? We can do better. Okay, there is our little fire alarm is cloned out. And I'm going to get this piece of sensor dust. And I'm going to get this guy. And I'm going to get this. Okay, and I see one more piece of sensor dust. Okay, there is our image finished in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Here we are back in Lightroom, and I'm loving the sort of overall color and feel of this. Not only do I sometimes add contrast in Photoshop with curves, but I'll do it also right here in Lightroom. Either way, I'm fine with. I'm not too picky about how I get my contrast as long as I get it. I also like adding a little texture and clarity back here in Lightroom. Just different ways of sort of spicing up the image. So I really like our overall edit. It is a bit crooked, a little bit drunk, so we're gonna have to straighten that out. I'm gonna come down here to, again, the guided transform and find me some vertical lines to straighten this out with. And there she is, nice and straightened. I think this needs a bit of a crop as well. There's a lot of like extraneous information. I don't think we need so much of this distorted foreground. Just a little hint is enough. I don't think we need so much of the left or the top. I'm gonna bring that down. I mean, can I get away with like going in here? Let's see. I want this to be more simple and graphic than anything. Just try to keep it to a 5x7. I think that does it. And as usual, I'm going to add a bit of a vignette, again, to sort of add some drama, give this some contrast in the shadows and highlights. And there is our finished shot. You can see our Lightroom edits, very subtle, but I think they've gone a long way to make this a sort of mysterious yet warm golden sunset hour image. A bit of a different take on the classic stairwell shot that's just a wide angle in the corner. I love that we're able to get that shadow in there and add a little bit of interest to an otherwise sort of boring photograph. Let's go back on location and get our next shot.